Last time on the Playmates Star Trek Retrospective.
The mixed series faded away and Warp Factor took its place. Strike Force disappointed many fans. New 12-inch dolls and cold cast statues randomly joined the lineup, and we had an infestation of tribbles.
And now, the conclusion.
Captain's log. As I begin preparations, I receive a message from Starfleet. On screen.
Hello there, Soundout. Yeah, I'm calling you because there's going to be a big change-up going on in Starfleet, specifically for my position as well as yours.
Captain Wheels, I'm glad to hear from you. What's this big shakeup, and why are you out of uniform?
Oh, why I'm out of uniform, you might ask? Well, that's a good question, because I recently got off the holodeck when I found out about the changes coming in Starfleet. The new program, though, is pretty interesting, and I think you need to check it out when you get a chance to visit the ship. And that's because it took me to this place called San Diego Comic-Con in the 21st century, 2022 to be exact. And it's like the mecca for all things like geek, pop culture, and people who just love science fiction and the arts. And interestingly, the archives introduced me to an actor who looks like he could be James T. Kirk's great-great-grandfather, like he's an ancestor. But the problem was, the guy just kept telling everyone that they were a double dumbass. The next time you're on our ship, you gotta come check out this program. It's really interesting. Kaus and Metal put all their efforts into recreating this event.
I'll have to check out that program on the holodeck sometime, but is that the only reason why you sent a transmission?
Alright, well as for the upcoming changes in Starfleet, you know how I said I'd love for you to visit the ship soon? Well, you're going to, whether you like it or not, because I'm getting promoted to another vessel, and I'm promoting you and recommending you to take over my vessel. And that change is going to happen around fall, but in the meantime, I gotta go and check out the neutral zone. And yeah, you're gonna get my ship soon, but there's a weird caveat. Starfleet wants you to keep doing retrospectives of content and media throughout the ages, but I'm pretty sure you're up to handling it.
Well, it'll certainly be nice to get out of the lower decks of this station. Maybe I'll even make a discovery on a strange new world.
Well, I think Darkon hit another cloaked vessel, and we're going into Red Alert. I will call you after the battle. Wheelchair out.
Well, I hope the USS Hero Club makes it back to Starfleet headquarters okay. In the meantime, I guess it's time to finish this retrospective series with one more episode. Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome to the final part of the Star Trek Playmates Toys retrospective. We've come to the end, and the reason why we're doing the rest of the line in one video is because, well, the line was going like this, and then it suddenly took a nosedive, and that ship crashed straight into a planet and exploded pretty fast. Like, faster than the Enterprise D exploded fast. So, we're going to be going through this because 1998, 1999, 2000, and the brief resurgence in 2009 were honestly complete disasters. So this is going to be a little depressing because we're going to have to go through a lot of very uncomfortable topics of, wow, how far did we fall this quickly? But that being said, I think the history is still important, and I'm going to make it as fun as possible along the way. Now, we have to have kind of a briefer on 1998, because 1998 was the kind of the year that Star Trek sort of fell apart in its popularity boom. There had been almost non-stop Star Trek since 1979 with the motion picture all the way through to 2004 with Enterprise. And the thing is that we'd had TV shows running from 1987 with Next Generation all the way through 2004 with Enterprise. So what happened? Obviously, Star Trek wasn't quite done until its huge hiatus after Enterprise. Why did the toy line stop? Well, most signs are pointing to the film Star Trek Insurrection. This is a movie I've come to really enjoy as a Trek fan, and just as a fan of the characters in general, but after First Contact had this big explosive time travel story with the Borg, Insurrection was a little light. And that was the intention, because they knew they couldn't top First Contact, and so they decided to go with something lighter. And unfortunately, the box office didn't perform as well, it wasn't enough to get another Next Generation movie, and the overall interest in Star Trek just started to wane. There had been so much Trek coming out constantly for almost a decade, or over a decade, that it actually caused the popularity bubble to burst, and in doing so also tanked the sales of Playmates toys Star Trek. Much like last time, I don't own every single figure, nor do I own every accessory, and the accessories aren't a major focus, otherwise these videos would be 3 hours long. For figures I don't own, I'm using images from the awesome website Wixaban. Check them out for all kinds of information on the Playmates Star Trek line, as well as other Star Trek toy and merchandise lines. It's a fantastic resource. This year's figures begin with Warp Factor 6-inch figures, because the last thing everyone wanted was more 6-inch figures that didn't scale with anything. And unfortunately, when it comes down to it, these are terrible. And I'll be getting into the details, but it definitely seemed like, you know, they thought, oh, we could do more 6-inch to match the First Contact figures. Or we could do action gimmicks and console pack-ins. So it's kind of like if they put all their good ideas on a dartboard, the things that would really reinvigorate the line, and then they just kind of took a shot at it, and that shot missed every single time. That's what it feels like. But here's the Warp Factor 6-inch figures with both the Combat Action Series and the Console Action Series. Okay, so the first assortment of the 6-inch figures is the Combat Action Series. As I mentioned, these are action gimmick figures. Not exactly what anyone was looking for. The unfortunate part too is the gimmicks usually ruin these figures. For example, Captain Jean-Luc Picard here has one arm stuck out to the side because fencing. That also means it must be really awkward for him holding any of the other accessories. Commander William Riker at least is holding his phaser rifle in a correct position, though I'm not exactly sure why the phaser rifle has 3 different handles. Could you have sculpted it a little bit better? Lieutenant Commander Worf is honestly not bad, and I'm glad that he's in his DS9 uniform to match the other DS9 figures we'll be getting in the scale. And he has a bat lift action, which means he actually looks the most normal out of all of them. The Borg figure, while I do have it, I don't plan on opening it, does look a lot like the First Contact figure with some different arm swap outs, and it has a couple different gimmicks, which honestly aren't too bad. And then there's Q. Q is based off of a singular episode. It's meant to go with the Picard, who can also have fencing action. And yeah, looking at this figure, he's not great. Articulation's pretty nothing. And he comes with a bunch of accessories that make no sense for him to have nor hold, because the only thing that works with his action feature is the fencing sword. And then going with that, yeah, I don't really know exactly what this gimmick is. Sure, it's fencing, but was it worth sacrificing the entire figure structure for? Fair warning, the following figures frustrate me as a collector because I love the idea of them, I just don't like the scale. The Cardassian soldier with a tactical station. Once again, I love this idea. This whole wave is figure plus station, like you would display a diorama on a ship. Now, of course, this would be the only Cardassian release, so therefore there's nothing else for this station to go with, and you can't put Gul Dukat or even Garrick in this station because those figures are a different scale. The Jim Hadar soldier with an engineering console. Same thing I just mentioned for the Cardassian, same thing goes for the Jim Hadar. Almost would have liked the navigation console or something because those cool like Jim Hadar headsets they had inside their ships would have been a neat addition. Captain Sisko in the Defiant Command chair would have been cool to have in the 4.5-inch scale. This would have been a perfect way for us to get the DS9 characters in their gray uniforms, but sadly that never happened in the 4.5-inch scale. Instead we're on 6-inch, but not reusing bodies, so what was the point? Jadzia Dax with the helm console. Honestly, again, not too bad. Would have loved to have seen this with 4.5-inch line that we've been collecting this whole time. Jumping to 6-inch for something like this is a shame. And then with Miles O'Brien, he doesn't look like Miles O'Brien, just like Dax doesn't really look like Dax. The larger scale doesn't help the likenesses, and he has a piece of the console. But also, nobody has chairs for their helm or engineering stations when they should, and that also looks strange. I like the idea of the figure comes with part of a playset or a diorama, but the ultimate execution didn't work because these were in the scale that had the least amount of figures that could work with them. So now we're back to the bread and butter of the Star Trek Playmates line, the 4.5 action figures. With the final 2 waves of Warp Factor, we have Series 4 and Series 5. I don't have kind things to say, so we're going to get into it, but let's just say they got really awkward and really weird, and it's a shame that these are the last 2 waves to be released at general retail. This is not a good end to a legendary toy line. The Warp Factor Series 4 packaging is the same as before, but has a 4 in the corner. So first up we have the Andorian. This is a TOS Andorian. It looks very much like the TOS Andorian, and yeah, that kind of leads to some weird design problems. That being said, does it make it a bad figure? Absolutely. Look at this awkward pose. Look at me trying to simulate this awkward pose. I don't really know what the heck they were going for. The Andorian also features like insane musculature, and it definitely seems like they were chasing a late 90s Power of the Force Star Wars vibe with these. Likeness-wise, it's something. Not entirely certain what it is. It definitely looks like an Andorian. His articulation is complete garbage. It's limited to just 5 points. He comes with a weird pink boa thing that definitely looks awkward. It looks too big. He also comes with a movie stand instead of a TOS stand. I don't know why we suddenly switched to movie stands for just all original series stuff. And he comes with this chair. He doesn't sit well in this chair. It's not fitted for his body. So yeah, this is quite the bizarre figure, and I can't even say it looks good with the other figures because of that weird squat stance, the overall different sculpting ideas. Ugh, this one sucks. So a much requested character was Keiko O'Brien. Finally joining the lineup, her husband Miles has had a couple versions by this point. She appeared on TNG as well as DS9 and was a frequent guest star. This figure looks just as awkward as the others, and I'm still trying to figure out how they design these poses. They make no sense. But looking at the overall figure, at least she is a unique mold, and that is something to commend at this point in the line. Likeness-wise, she looks pretty good. I actually think it's not a bad likeness overall. I think the biggest problem is the body, not so much the head. And her articulation is surprisingly not limited. A lot of the other figures in this wave are going to be super limited, but she actually has swivels and bends that normal figures would have, except it means nothing because she's awkwardly pre-posed. Also, she comes with a stand that she can't fully stand on. We're back to wide-stanced Worf days, and the line is almost over. She does make a nice companion to her husband Miles, and it is nice to add another character to the DS9 lineup, even if she does sort of stand out for not having a neutral stance like most of the other figures. Next up, another TOS character, Toyline. This is a character that is sort of Q-like or a Renegade Q, depending on the source material you look at. This figure's terrible. God, I'm not even gonna try to do this pose. Just look at this guy. He's the most awkward looking thing ever. What even is this? What happened to the neutral stances? Looking at his likeness, it's, once again, it's too soft, it's too weird. This whole wave sucks. His articulation, as you can imagine, is pretty garbage and doesn't do anything. Once again, he comes with a movie stand despite being a TOS figure, and his accessories, he mostly can't hold, but at least he can hold the sword, but he looks so awkward doing so. It is cool to see the mirror device with a nice little sticker on it, and he can face down Kirk, even though Kirk is just going, hey, I can swivel my elbows, can you? Next up, we have Kang. This is his appearance from DS9's episode Blood Oath, which was the return of the original series Klingons. And yet again, we're looking at a very awkward pose. Though this one's not as bad as the others, it's still rough. I think body-wise, this looks nothing like Kang from that episode. It's too muscular, it's too stocky, and in general, the likeness is okay. We're really in rough times with this lineup. So articulation-wise, his arms are pretty much permanently turned to be holding a batleth, but he does have elbows. I hate that elbows is a compliment now. And his batleth is actually gigantic. It's a different mold, and I wonder if it did come from the First Contact Worf figure or something, or one of those larger 6-inch figures. He can hold it, but not quite well. He doesn't fully grip it, so the pre-posing didn't even work in this case. And his other accessories look absolutely ridiculous when you try to have him hold them, so what even is the point? Does make a nice companion to Dax from that same episode, but it is kind of a shame that his only companion Klingon-wise is Koloth, who is based on his TOS look, and we never saw Kor. Intendant Kira is Kira's Mirror Universe counterpart. She was a frequent guest star on the show and the main villain of the Mirror Universe episodes, so it's nice to have her in the line. Now, she's actually kind of hard to find, which is why I found this really nice Crush package one. Intendant Kira, once again, very awkward pose, and I can pull this one off better because she's basically just half striding while holding her arms out at the farthest possible angle. Overall, it is a unique body sculpt, and I guess that's a compliment, even though she looks awkward as heck. Head sculpt-wise, she's kind of got Gowron eyes going on, but essentially doesn't look that great compared to the actual Intendant Kira from the series. Posability, as you can imagine, super duper limited and completely useless because you're only going to have her in the one pose she's already sculpted in. And when you put her on the stand, she actually stands better than the other characters on the Bajoran stands just because she has a wide stance as opposed to a narrow one. She does face down against crossover Cisco pretty good, but yeah, still looking really awkward. Like, I think he can take her. And as you can see, it is quite a downgrade on the likeness from Kira Nerys to Intendant Kira. I won't lie to you all, this is my least favorite wave of the whole lineup because there's 5 new characters here and all of them suck. All these figures are terrible because of the pre-posing and the weird over-muscular structures of a lot of them, and they don't fit in with the rest of the lineup. So while we got some last-minute new characters, they just don't look good with the rest of the line, and that's just such a shame. They stand out, and that bugs me. Warp Factor Series 5, there's a 5 on the box. This is the last Warp Factor for the 4.5-inch line. Okay, just in case your terrible Edith Keeler figure was lonely, Kirk and Spock from A City on the Edge of Forever. Pre-posed, overly muscular, can't use their accessories, looks really awkward. I had these figures at one point, they got lost somewhere, and I honestly don't care because these are just such a waste that we're in the last wave of the line and we're getting 2 character variants we didn't need and also look terrible on top of it. Next up, we have the Borg Queen. Distinctively based on Alice Krieg's Borg Queen. She is pre-posed, she has minimal articulation, and I'm gonna give her a pass. And you're probably wondering why. Well, first of all, the pre-posed isn't bad. This looks like the Borg Queen's kind of natural stance, which works for me. The likeness is pretty good overall. I gotta say, there's definitely worse likenesses of the line, and this is honestly pretty solid. Now, there was a gimmick, which I normally disparage. However, this one makes sense. You can remove the Borg Queen's torso from her body. This is a thing that we're known for from First Contact. This is the thing she's known for even doing in Voyager. It's an iconic part of the Borg Queen, and it worked well into the figure. And when you put the Borg Queen next to a Picard figure, she doesn't look out of place because that's kind of the natural Borg Queen stance. Same thing of her facing off Janeway. It works pretty well. And putting her in a Borg display, she doesn't look out of place because, again, it's a pre-posed stance, but it's a natural one. It's not so awkward like the previous waves. Next up, we have 7 of 9 in her Borg appearance, specifically from the Gift. So not a full Borg, but kind of half Borg. It's halfway between full Borg and her biosuit we're used to. So this figure is pre-posed, not too bad. Again, it doesn't look natural, I'd say, but it does look more in line with 7 in the episode. I think if her arms could extend down, it would have been perfect. And while this is a uniquely sculpted figure, I gotta say, and the likeness isn't too bad. This is kind of a weird look to do because it's only happened for 1 episode. She does have minimal articulation, but it's not too bad, all things considered, due to the limited nature of her experience in the show. She has a different colored Borg stand. It's silver instead of red, which is pretty neat. She also comes with a Borg alcove accessory that does not come with anything to attach to, no stand or anything, so I guess you're just supposed to hold it behind her head. And then when you're done, just leave it on the ground, I guess. As you can see, 7 does make a nice companion to the Borg Queen in a way. And again, they're pre-posed, but not overly dynamically pre-posed in ways that look really weird. She is a bit tall, though. I know Jeri Ryan is tall, but she's way taller than Janeway. It's almost like they're from 2 different scales. Now, most Warp Factor waves have been 5 figures, so you're probably wondering where's the 5th. Well, very late into production, Bell was canceled. Bell was a TOS character, played by Frank Gorshin. As seen in this magazine scan, he would have been probably more naturally posed than a lot of the other figures from these couple waves. I mean, you can just look at him and the Borg Queen compared to the rest of them in this photo, and you can see why the pre-posing didn't work. And honestly, it would have been nice to have seen him, but sadly he was canceled. Overall, this wave felt kind of like a waste. We had Kirk and Spock in versions no one needed. We had 7 in a version that was rarely used. At least if they did the full Borg from Scorpion, that had some more screen time. The most worthwhile figure was, well, the Borg Queen. And that's all I got. That's the last retail wave of the 4.5-inch line, and it really went out on a whimper.
In order to beef up the 4.5-inch line this year with some recognizable mainstay characters, Playmates came up with the Transporter series. Definitely feels like another one of those things that came out of the dartboard analogy from earlier, because I don't know who necessarily asked for these or wanted every main character from TOS and TNG, minus some exceptions, in glowy transporter plastic. But we got 12 of them!
As much as it pains me to say it, the bulk of the 4.5-inch figures this year was the Transporter series. This is a way to get the classic characters back out again in new versions without doing anything that's actually worthwhile, but at least it put them back on the shelves. Looking at a Transporter series, I do have Worf. The packaging is not bad. It's nice and concise. I think it presents the gimmick well, and overall you can see, like, you know, it's got the bio, it's got everything. These aren't total throwaways. Now, unfortunately, the Try Me function is no longer working, so we're gonna hope it works when I get this out of the package. Opening it up,
I can tell you that it has a lot of twist ties that actually go in and out of the transporter base, which is kind of surprising, and I forgot that toys used to do that a lot. Looking at the Worf figure, he pretty much is like a half-clear Worf with a transporter glittery effect going on, so it'll work with a light-up base. And in fact, he is the TNG body with the DS9 head, painted like a DS9 uniform because they inverted the colors for some reason. They did this with all of them. And yeah, the rubber bands kind of got stuck to this guy, so keep that in mind if you're looking for these. The transporter base itself looks like a transporter pad that's been isolated with a little backdrop. Now actually looking at the transporter pad, you can push the button, and you get a neat little light effect and a sound. Honestly, not too bad. So the Transporter series released 12 figures in 1998. Wave 1 included Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Scotty. Wave 2 included Data, Picard, Worf, Riker, and Geordi LaForge. And then Target had an exclusive limited to 10,000, Chekhov and Sulu. Well, Playmates decided to rip open some old wounds and toss some salt in them. This is the 1701 series box set. Now, this is controversial. The 1701 series, as we talked about in previous videos, was very controversial. It was limiting figures to 1,701 units. Very much backlash. So Playmates, in their infinite wisdom, re-released all of them at general retail in a box set. I think this is supposed to alleviate some fan concern, but it definitely brought up some just old wounds, because then it meant that they could have released them in mass numbers from the beginning. And that just kind of hurt people because they spent maybe hundreds of dollars to get them because they thought they were that limited. Just for Playmates to turn around and re-release them with the same color accessories. Everything's the same except there are no collector numbers on their feet. And who even looks at the collector numbers on the feet anymore? That was definitely a flash in the pan thing. This is actually how I own these figures. And yeah, it's kind of sucks that this was so easy to get that even in 2021, I could pick it up for about 20 bucks. Yeah, this was kind of, I think, a good intention to re-release the figures, but making it so available sort of told people, oh yeah, we could have made them available the whole time like this. We just chose not to.
In an effort to continue to make as many sublines as possible, Playmates introduced 4.5-inch action figures in box sets. Most of these contain one repack figure or repaint figure and one new figure. And they have kind of an environmental display. And there actually is some neat ones in here that are really cool, and they're all based on specific episodes. So let's take a look at these, because I think that out of everything that we got that was kind of weird at the end of the line, this is some of the best stuff.
Our first of the 2-pack box sets is based on the Next Generation episode Clues. This features Picard and Guinan in Dixon Hill attire. So, first of all, we have Picard as Dixon Hill. This is a recolor of the previous Dixon Hill figure, now in a brown suit. This is the one I own, and honestly, I don't feel like I ever need to open the gray one. It's just Picard as Dixon Hill. And it does go well with the Data in 40s attire that I previously owned. Guinan as Gloria is honestly not a bad figure, and she has better arm movement than some of the Warp Factor figures, which is kind of crazy. And overall, yeah, she looks nice, and it's nice to get another Guinan, which means, yeah, we have 3 Guinans now. Kind of crazy. Now, there are 2 other box sets that I don't have. First of all, Kirk with Baylock and Baylock's puppet from the TOS episode Carbonite Maneuver. I own this. I know I bought this. I can't find it. It goes for too much to buy another one for the sake of a video, so I hope you'll forgive me. Baylock and his puppet are both static figures. You can pretty much get everything you need to out of this image. I know I have them somewhere, and I really hope I find them sometime. The other set is based on the TNG episode A Fistful of Datas and features Worf as well as Alexander, now repainted with more paint detail, as well as a holodeck version of Data as the Sheriff. The last 1998 box set, based on the episode Scorpion from Star Trek Voyager, features Harry Kim and Species 8472. I own this one, and actually, it's pretty neat. So looking at the boxes, you can kind of see the general idea of having backdrop displays, 2-packs, that sort of thing that we've gotten for the others. And it has a bunch of descriptions and details on the episode and everything, which is always nice. There's like a book's worth of text on a lot of these later packaging. Now, the actual set does come with 2 different figures and a diorama base, though you're going to have to cut out the cardboard backdrop in order to actually use it on the diorama base. So I just kind of put the figures back in the cardboard if I really want to display it with the diorama. Let's get the Harry Kim out of the way. He's the same basic figure we've already had, except he's got poison on his face from when he got attacked by species 8472. And as you can see, it's not even resculpted, it's just some extra paint detail, and it kind of looks like mud on his face more than anything. Species 8472 is actually one of the most unique figures in the lineup. It's larger than we normally get, as well as having a unique design. This was, I believe, the first all-CG Star Trek alien, and they definitely went a little bit wild with the design. And actually, 8472 does have a lot of articulation, more so than some of the other figures. Though while this design looks like it belongs in Animorphs more than Star Trek, I actually think it made a cool figure. It does look like, though, that they sculpted the legs fully extended and then they're retracted based on the cuts. That's the only real complaint I have. So while this figure does get a lot of attention for being, wow, it's that weird CG alien no one liked that got a toy, it made a cool toy. They actually went all out on this one, and I have to give them credit for that. Plus, yeah, it works as a diorama thing. It's very dynamic.
Now, as the line's interest started to wane, Playmates still found other avenues to release figures. That being mail-away exclusives through magazines such as Toyfare or other places such as New Force Comics. There are actually more than one this year, and this will be a prominent thing for years to come. So the first mail-away figure is Tapestry 2 Picard. This is Picard if he hadn't taken the choice that he did, and he would have appeared in a nothing job in a medical uniform or a sciences uniform. And yeah, I mean, it's nothing major. Could have gotten this by mailing away from Toyfare magazine number 11, and there also was a signed variant released. Next up we have Captain Calhoun. Most people may not know this, but Captain Calhoun comes from Star Trek New Frontier. He's not a well-known character, he is part of the expanded universe, not from the TV shows, and it makes him unique. He was a mail away from the Star Trek Communicator magazine, and he actually was the first appearance of the gray uniforms in the 4.5-inch style. Next up we have Governor Worf. This was with the VHS box set Worf Return to Grace, and this was limited to 40,000 units. It is essentially just the All Good Things Worf in a different color scheme. As a mail away with Toyfare magazine number 13, the translucent Geordi LaForge as the Tarkanan 3 alien. This was from the episode Identity Crisis, and this is when he glowed later in the episode, and that actually works pretty good as a counter to the version that was released at retail, which was the non-glowy version. Throughout this series, I've always said, hey, every year there's ships and roleplay. This is the last time I get to say that. There's one ship and one roleplay item. And that's the end of both of those lines for Star Trek. So the last ship released in the Playmates line was the USS Enterprise 1701E from Star Trek Insurrection. This is an update to the First Contact release, and it is more movie accurate, and it does feature a removable captain's yacht, which is pretty cool. It is the ultimate version of the E from Playmates, and it would be the last ship released in the line. And the final roleplay is yet another variation on the Starfleet Type 2 phaser, this one from Star Trek Insurrection. I have no further notes. The 9-inch dolls keep trucking forward, somehow releasing seemingly more new characters than the 4.5-inch action figure line, and the 9-inch dolls are going to get more warp factor and start getting into exclusive territory, so brace yourselves, it's getting crazy. The 9-inch warp factor line, Series 3 contained the Jem'Hadar soldier, Gul Dukat, who actually looks like Gul Dukat, which is definitely an upgrade, as well as Captain Kirk in his casual attire. Warp Factor Series 4 of the 9-inch contained Captain Benjamin Sisko in his appearance from Trials and Tribulations. I didn't think I'd be saying the word tribble again. As well as Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax from the episode Trials and Tribulations. As well as 7 of 9 in her silver biosuit. Warp Factor Series 5 contained the Telosian from TOS, Aleem Garrick in a different costume than his 4.5-inch figure, and Bell, who also would have been 4.5-inch, but instead we just got this 9-inch version, but at least one toy version did come out for this guy. Now, likely due to the disaster of the Generations and First Contact lines, Playmates opted to not make any 4.5-inch Insurrection figures, even though it would have been a nice chance to get the gray uniforms in the 4.5-inch style, so instead we just get 9 inches, including Picard in a more casual outfit, Riker shaved and in his uniform, Worf in his casual attire, and LaForge in his uniform with his cool beard. Also, I have this LaForge figure. He's not bad. He actually looks pretty good overall. In 1998, there was 4 Target exclusive 9-inch dolls, Mr. Spock in his environmental suit, and Chekhov in his environmental suit, which, as you can imagine, are just Spock and Chekhov in environmental suits. I mean, I have the Chekhov. He's pretty cool, even though if you remove his helmet, it looks really weird because one part of it doesn't come off. The other wave of Target exclusives contained the Doctor, the emergency medical hologram, as well as Ensign Harry Kim.
The last wave of 9-inch dolls were exclusive to KB Toys and all based on the episode Mirror Mirror and limited to 7,200 units. We have Dr. McCoy, Lieutenant Uhura, Captain James Kirk, and Mr. Spock.
So apparently the Masterpiece Captains releases were not selling well enough to continue, but well enough to have a whole new 12-inch action figure line. Yeah, we are really close to the end of Playmates' output, and they roll out a whole line of 12-inch figures. Now this was probably done because Star Wars had a whole line of 12-inch figures starting in 96 to 97, and, Playmates said, hey, we can do 12-inch, and Star Wars said, hey, we can copy your box design. I mean, seriously, these both have, Velcro opening flaps to show the figure inside. They're, uncannily similar.
The 12-inch lineup for Insurrection. First of all, we have Captain Picard in his dress uniform. This figure does look nice, and I do like the packaging on these overall. I like the open window boxes and the opening flap. It's honestly really cool, and it has a lot of bio text. On the back, there is an absolute book's worth of Star Trek history, giving you the basics of Star Trek history from the beginning to now. Speaking of other figures in the lineup, we have Commander William Riker in his dress uniform. We have Lieutenant Commander Worf in his normal uniform, and Lieutenant Commander Data in his normal uniform.
Who'da thunk it? They made more cold cast statues. Cold cast resin, the newest form of technology for Playmates toys.
In terms of cold cast resin, the Latinum series contained a Vulcan leader from First Contact, limited to 550 units, only released in the UK, Japan, and Australia. There was a Kirk, which was limited to 2,500 units, and a 7 of 9 in her silver biosuit, limited to 2,500 units. We had another 6-inch cold cast resin diorama, this one being of Kirk and Spock from Mirror Mirror, limited to 5,000. There also was a 6-inch cold cast resin Ultra Trek line that seemed to use the same sculpts as the basic action figures, containing a Locutus with a limited edition of Unknown, and a Borg Queen, also limited edition of Unknown. They were limited in some way, but we don't know what the number was.
As 1998 draws to a close, 1999 begins. This is going to be kind of a sad year. Star Trek Deep Space Nine wraps up its 7th season with the finale episode, What We Leave Behind. An appropriate title and an appropriate feeling, because Playmates Toys didn't release any general retail 4.5-inch action figures this year. This is it. Everything here was a store exclusive, because the line was just not desired by retailers anymore. The sales were too low. The bubble of Star Trek popularity had just burst, even though there was a new Las Vegas attraction with Star Trek The Experience opening in 1998. It didn't reinvigorate Star Trek the way I think a lot of things intended, especially with Insurrection kind of hitting soft with a lot of audience. And with DS9 out the door, Voyager was now the only Star Trek show on air. And notoriously with Voyager, they had a lot of one-off characters, which made it harder for Playmates to make those figures. And what we ultimately ended up getting was a lot of gap fillers and just things that were made because they had to be. And it's kind of a shame that the last full year of the line really is a bunch of stuff most people can't find, because a lot of these figures are actually really rare. And in fact, what's kind of insane is that the 9-inch and the 12-inch still got general retail releases over the 4.5-inch. And that's what I meant when I introduced them earlier in this series, as the 9-inch and 12-inch would take over the line, because that was the main retail output. But all that would change eventually. But let's start diving into 1999 properly. Now we're looking at the Starfleet Command lineup for the 4.5-inch action figures. This ultimately was the last-ditch effort Playmates was trying to do to win over fans, I guess. Whether these were intended to be part of Warp Factor in 98 or 99, but ended up being exclusive because they already made the molds, these are the First Contact uniforms for the TNG cast members. These could have been used for future figures such as DS9 characters. These could have been used for a lot of things, but ultimately they came so late in the line, they ended up just being kind of a one-off. They were also all limited to 10,000 units exclusive to Target in the US. These made them very hard to find, as Target made them regionally available, not locally available, meaning it was only in certain places. On top of that, 7 of 9, a new and popular character for Voyager, featured proper figures of her in her biosuit. There was a silver and there was a blue. Now there may be some people asking, I've never seen the blue one. Well, that's because the blue 7 of 9, as well as Dr. Crusher in the First Contact uniform, did not release in the US and only released in UK and Australia. and that means there's even less of them out there. These are some of the rarest figures the line has produced and still command high prices. I in fact only own one of the Starfleet Command figures, and that being Worf, and he was one of the cheaper ones somehow. I found him at a convention for $25. But usually these command triple-digit numbers, even today, and that's kind of amazing for this line. Now, when it comes down to it, I don't own anything besides Worf, and I don't really want to open Worf due to the rarity of these figures. So I apologize if this is a little brief, but there's not too much unique here that there isn't somewhere else.
Okay, so limited to 10,000 would be the Starfleet Command Edition. These were released in waves of 2 at Target stores. Wave 1 contained Captain Picard in his first contact gray uniform. We also would get Lieutenant Commander Worf. I actually do own this figure. You can see that he does look nice. It's the same head we've been using since Generations for Worf, which is definitely the better Worf head sculpt. And overall, it's basically like a Warp Series figure without the Warp Series branding. The second wave contains 7 of 9 in her silver biosuit, as well as Lieutenant Commander Data from First Contact. Wave 3 contained Counselor Deanna Troi and Commander William Riker. Those first 3 waves apparently sold so poorly that Target dropped the line, and the last 2 figures were only released internationally and only had 4,000 produced, making them some of the rarest figures in the lineup. That includes Dr. Beverly Crusher in her First Contact uniform and 7 of 9 in her blue biosuit. Kind of insane that those 2 figures are probably the rarest in the whole lineup.
2 more Transporter Series figures.
There are 2 more Transporter Series figures, limited to 10,000 at Target, Nurse Christine Chapel, and Yeoman Janice Rand. It is unknown if Deanna Troi and Beverly Crusher were ever going to be part of this lineup, because these are the only 2 that were released or told us on the packaging.
We have a couple more 4.5-inch box sets, and nothing new, nothing that unique. There is technically new figures, some new paint and part swapping, but nothing that fancy.
So Target really just took on the 4.5-inch line, because here are some box sets exclusive to Target. First of all, we have a 2-pack with a Locutus of Borg, that is a repack, as well as a Borg drone based on the version 2 without the chrome, and an environmental display. And then we had another 2-pack, which was the Tholian Web inspired, which has a repack of Spock, as well as Kirk in his environmental suit that's half transported away, sort of an interface thing, but might not look too bad on a transporter base.
Wouldn't you know it? More mail-away figures.
So first we have Spock in his environmental suit from the Tholian Web. This is essentially just the Kirk figure with a Spock head put inside. This was available through Toy Fair magazine number 15, limited to 15,000. The next one is Lieutenant Natasha Yar in a Transporter series without the base, meaning she's lost all the functionality. Her uniform's in the correct colors, so it doesn't match the other figures, and like I'd mentioned, there's no Deanna Troi or Dr. Crusher, so she doesn't even complete a set. Very strange, but she was available through Toy Fair magazine number 19. We also have Captain James T. Kirk in 1920s mobster attire from A Piece of the Action, aka the theme of 1999, you'll see what I mean soon, and he was available through Toy Fair magazine number 23. And then lastly, we had Captain Catherine Janeway, her only figure variant, as her from Flashback, featuring the Monster Maroon uniform, which means she has the Savick body with a Janeway head, and she was available through the New Force Comics website.
For the 1999 9-inch dolls, there was one general retail wave of a second wave Insurrection, and the rest of them were exclusive to stores. Let's take a look.
The second wave of Insurrection 9-inch dolls includes Deanna Troi in a more casual attire, Data in a more casual attire, Urafo, who is the main villain, as well as Anish, who was a supporting character in the movie. Finishing off their Mirror collection, KB Toys is limited to 7,200 figures, included Sulu and Marlena. The 9-inch dolls exclusive to Target as part of the Starfleet Command initiative includes Kirk in his environmental suit, 7 of 9 in a burgundy biosuit, Nurse Christine Chapel, Captain Picard in his captain's jacket, Data as Sherlock Holmes for some reason, and LaForge as Watson, also for some reason. KB Toys started a new subset of original series figures, limited to 5,000, including Trelane, who looks much better than his 4.5-inch counterpart, Edith Keeler, who is much better than her 4.5-inch counterpart, and then Kirk, as well as Spock, in their appearances from a mock time.
So while the 4.5-inch figures have been reduced to Target exclusives, while the 9-inch figures have been exclusive to KB Toys primarily, the 12-inch line got 4 whole waves at general retail. They really were going for the 12 inches at the end. This was the line that stayed general retail. We have 4 waves to go over, and there's one Star Trek Fan Club exclusive. But 4 waves at retail, when the main 4.5-inch line that most people cared about was pretty much dead in the water. It's insane.
So wave 1 of the 12-inch includes Mr. Spock in his TOS appearance. And here is Mr. Spock. I actually have a loose one. It's the only 12-inch I have loose. So you can see a general size scaling of him compared to a 4.5-inch and a 9-inch figure. You can see that overall his details are pretty good. He looks fairly fine, and the uniform details are pretty nicely done on these figures. Articulation is probably about the same as the 9-inch dolls. These are essentially just larger versions. The rest of Wave 1 includes the Andorian Shrosh, Captain Janeway, as well as LaForge from Star Trek Insurrection. Wave 2 of the 12-inch line includes the Mugato, 7 of 9 in her silver biosuit, Dr. McCoy in his TOS appearance, as well as Chekhov. Wave 3 of the 12-inch line, we got the Gorn Captain from TOS, Deanna Troi in her purple jumpsuit thing, Scotty in his TOS appearance, and Sulu in his TOS appearance. There's a lot of TOS in this 12-inch line. Wave 4 includes Q in his judge robes, Uhura in her TOS appearance, Captain Sisko, and Captain Pike, who was from the Masterpiece Captain series as well. There was a fan club exclusive for the Star Trek fan club that had Kirk as a Romulan. It's another one of those, why? Why this late in the line were you making this and not other things?
It's 1999, the line is basically dead, and here's more things no one asked for that were probably decided upon by that same dartboard.
And just because Playmates couldn't let this line die without adding another subset, the 9-inch Alien Combat series. Though I admit these look cool. There was a Borg drone, as well as a Klingon warrior. Very stylized, but they kind of look neat.
We've entered 2000. Most people don't even realize that Playmates was making stuff in 2000. That's how just minimal this all became. And ultimately this was the last year of the line, but there's barely anything to talk about. However, I have one of the 2000 releases. In the 4.5-inch scale, we had 2 releases. A 7 of 9 mail away in her plum biosuit, which is the easiest 7 of 9 in a biosuit to get, and an Amok Time 2-pack exclusive to New Force Comics. These 3 figures are the last figures for Playmates' 4.5-inch line. Let's take a look at them and mourn where we started from.
The last figure I own of the 4.5-inch line to be released was 7 of 9 in her plum biosuit as a Toy Fair magazine number 29 mail away. This is the easiest of the 7 biosuits to get, even though it is still harder to find, and overall I think she looks good. This sculpt, just like some of the others, is pre-posed, but it's like Lita, it's like the Borg Queen, it looks more natural. And overall, while she is limited in articulation, she's fine. She looks good next to her Borg counterpart, and she looks fine next to Janeway, even if she is a little bit tall. Plus, yeah, she goes with the Borg Queen well. You really can have a 7 for every flavor. And yeah, you can put her with any of the Voyager figures and it looks correct. You can even put her with all the Voyager main cast members and guest stars that we got, and she looks like she blends right in. The final 4.5-inch action figure release, Kirk and Spock in an Amok Time 2-pack with an environmental backdrop, limited to 3,000, only available through New Force Comics.
The 9-inch line is pretty much retired. There were releases in 2000, and they were only just warp factor repacks of previous releases. And they're so uncommon I can't even find pictures of them, so we're not going to worry about it. 12-inch figures also got KB Toys repacks, but again, couldn't find pictures of them to even find out if they had different boxes. And ultimately, there were 4 more 12-inch figures, meaning there was more 12-inch in the final year than there was 4.5-inch. And I'm done complaining about that. But let's look at these, because I think Playmates was starting to get obsessed with some TOS episodes. Specifically, a piece of the action certainly got a lot of attention in this toy line.
Also available through New Force Comics was 2 exclusive 12-inch action figures of Kirk and Spock from A Piece of the Action, limited to 1,000. That means Kirk and Spock and A Piece of the Action was in 4.5-inch minus Spock, 9-inch with both, and 12-inch with both, and that's insane. The final 2 12-inch releases would be Kirk and Spock in their Rathacon uniforms, limited to KB Toys and limited to 5,000 units.
2000 has come to an end, which means we've come to the end of the Playmates Star Trek toy line. Now this video isn't over yet because we still have some other topics to talk about, but I just want to say that in 8 years, Playmates produced the widest variety of Star Trek toys and products we could have ever seen. Whether it was, the high diversity of the 4.5-inch line, whether it was 9-inch and 12-inch dolls that nobody really asked for, whether it was switching to 6-inch randomly because they felt like it, or making cold cast resin because somebody had that idea. They had such weird and random stuff, but they also had a commitment to just making whatever Star Trek they could, and I have not seen a company do that since, or before. This was the longest running single toy line from a company, and their entire run is honestly legendary because it covered every show and every movie that had been out at the time. And while we would have other people that would replace them, such as Diamond Select, when it came to doing Enterprise and some of the other series, such as TOS, the movies, TNG, and a little DS9, they never touched Voyager. And they didn't really do their action figure line beyond just main cast members in a lot of ways. And so when I think it comes down to it, I think that Playmates should still be commended for the fact that they put out so many different characters. Some were just one-offs, some were just variants, and while they can be critiqued and criticized for a lot of reasons, especially the way they treat the collector community with things like 1701, I think it ultimately comes down to the fact that we did have a wide variety of Star Trek figures that we may never see anything of that magnitude again. And I just wanted to celebrate that. And now I'm going to talk about characters they should have made because there are some omissions that are too glaring to let go. So let's look at who they didn't make.
So let's talk missing characters from the 4.5-inch and the 9-inch lines. Honestly, they made so many characters, but here's the ones I think that really we did need. In the TOS movie lineup, we never got Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Sulu in the Rathacon era uniforms. Those uniforms are iconic, and we should have had the full set. TNG made a lot of characters, but one they missed? Nurse Alyssa Ogawa. Honestly, you probably just needed to sculpt a new head. She appeared in 16 episodes and was quite a frequent guest star, as well as having her own dedicated storyline in an episode, so yeah, she even appeared in a couple of the movies. For DS9, there was a lot of exclusions, and it's kind of a shame because DS9 did have the largest guest cast that essentially became regulars with how often they appeared. But speaking of series regulars, Ezri Dax is the only series regular character to not have a 4.5-inch figure or any other figure in the lineup. She only appeared in season 7, yes, but the line was still healthy enough when that happened that it could have been done, and it's a shame that it wasn't. In terms of guest stars though, Nog. We really should have got a Starfleet uniform version. He really became his own person at that time, and he deserved to have, moving elbows. General Martok never got made? One of the coolest Klingons in the entire franchise? Ridiculous. Cassidy Yates, a great supporting character. The line had always had great supporting characters. We just got Keiko, but no Cassidy. Speaking of powerful women in DS9, what about Mugi? Yeah, Ishka. We got so many other Ferengi. We got Quark. We got Rom. We even got a little Nog. But no Mugi. On that train, where was Brunt? Brunt would have been a great figure as well. And speaking of Jeffrey Combs, where was Wei Yun and where was Damar? Those two were like the tag team villain group of the last third of DS9. That would have been great. And speaking of villains, the female changeling. You probably could have even reused Odo's face because apparently they used the same mask in the series. And of course, the true villain of DS9, Kai Wynn. Playmates, my child. Why didn't we get a Kai Wynn? Over in Voyager, I struggled to find any characters that didn't get made because Voyager did have a large main cast, but Naomi Wildman would have been a great companion to Seven, and the Hirogen was an alien I really liked that could have gone well with the Species 8472 as well as other figures. In terms of the 9-inch line, we were lacking in some series regulars, which I thought was strange. For TNG, there was no TNG Worf, there was no Tasha Yar, and there was no Wesley Crusher. For DS9, of course, no Ezri Dax, but no Quark and no Jake either. And for Voyager, no Kess, no Neelix, and no B'Elanna Torres? Really?
So ultimately, this series would not be complete unless I talked about the canceled toys. I luckily was able to find a lot of product catalogs, some Toy Fair images, and some information out there. So while this could be its own video, I just don't feel like there's enough to talk about beyond just, hey, look at the thing they didn't make. So let's take a look at the canceled toy rundown.
First up, in the 1994 catalog, Space Talk was shown with just the normal 4.5-inch figures, but it showed Worf, Deanna, Picard, and Data, of which only Picard ever got made in Space Talk. There also was a canceled phaser rifle toy, which honestly looked pretty cool, and I wish that would have come out. In 1995, There was an All Good Things Enterprise electronic version as opposed to the transwarping version we got. There was a Kazon ship that would have come with an exclusive Kazon figure. There was a prototype for a Cardassian ship, which actually appeared in a Toy Fair booth as well. There was a catalog listing for the Chromium series, which was listed as being 3-inch figure assortment that would have been die-cast and featured a bunch of different characters we normally would see. The Ferengi Marauder was another canceled electronic ship. There was also a training phaser that would have come with a target of a Borg to shoot, as well as a Romulan disruptor for the roleplay line. There also was plans for a Interspace Series connecting playset to make the USS Enterprise D, and actually I kind of like the way this looked, though I'm ultimately happy with what we got. There was a Star Trek Battle of the Borg board game that just never happened. It's weird when you have a canceled board game. And then there was the 30th anniversary TOS bridge playset, which we previously mentioned, that just never came to market. 1998 was sort of the downfall of the line, so in turn, a lot of these items just were cut. First of all, the deluxe 9-inch figure assortment would have had an extra outfit each, so you could have had Spock in his Voyage home disguise, as well as his normal Monster Maroon uniform, Picard in his Locutus look, as well as his normal look, and then Kira Nerys in a fancy dress from Way of the Warrior, as well as her normal look. There also was listings, but not a picture, for Commander Data in his first season attire, as well as an elementary Dear Data outfit, presumably him as Sherlock Holmes. For the 12-inch figures, they were originally going to be packed similar to the Masterpiece Captain series before the packaging change, and they did have a Salt Vampire plan, but never showed any pictures of it. At one point, there was going to be a cold cast Resin Worf, but much like him and the Vulcan leader he's next to, never really saw wide release, nor release at all for Worf. There were some canceled console series. These would have been 6-inch TOS figures with parts to make up the TOS bridge, and they were shown at a Toy Fair. Cisco and Pike in their 12 inches were originally supposed to be packed in the Masterpiece Captain series before that packaging style was retired for the version we did get. There was a diorama of 7 of 9 for the Cold Cast series that would have featured her in the brig during The Gift. There also was an Ultra Check 7, which would have been in her burgundy biosuit and looked similar to the 4.5-inch figure. And then there was additional Ultra Trek figures that we did not see, which included Khan, Mirror Kirk, as well as First Contact Data. But that's about it for the lineup of the canceled toys. Like I said, there may be more out there that I don't know about, but this is everything I could find in my research.
And that's wave 1 of Playmates' new Star Trek toy line. Wait, what am I doing here? This is not the right timeline. So years had passed after the cancellation of the line. Diamond Select Toys had stepped in and done some figures, done some ships. They were really good at ships and roleplay, actually. But in 2009, with Paramount launching the brand new Star Trek film that was a pseudo reboot to bring in new audiences and kind of reinvigorate the band, they went and got Playmates as the licensor. Unfortunately, we had one of the biggest disasters of toy shelves that made toy companies nervous to pick up the Star Trek license when Playmates lost it again, and specifically it made retailers nervous to ever stock Star Trek on the shelves because the following toys sat around for years after the movie. And why did this happen? What was so wrong with this lineup? Well, let's take a look at the 2009 figures that were released and what was promised that never got delivered, that ultimately led to the downfall of the 2009 movie line before it ever truly began.
So for the 3 3/4-inch 2009 line, which does not scale well with the old figures at all, which is a shame, we had Kirk, Sulu, Original Spock, Uhura, Pike, Cadet McCoy, Nero, Cadet Chekhov, Spock, and Scotty. That means that the entire main cast wasn't released in the same outfit styles. These all contain pieces of the bridge that would go with the bridge playset that was never completed due to the cancellations. For the 6-inch lineup for 2009, that would probably, I guess, go with your old First Contact figures. Kirk, Spock. We had Original Spock, Pike, Nero, Sulu, Cadet Uhura, Cadet McCoy, Cadet Chekhov, and Scotty. Once again, a mismatched set. There is no complete set of the main cast members in the same uniforms. Just because working in 3 different scales worked from so good before when the line almost tanked from oversaturation, they did it again, and here is a 12-inch line. We have Kirk, we have Original Spock, we have Spock, and we have McCoy, with Sulu and Pike being exclusive to Toys R Us. So not a complete set there either. The crux of the 3 3/4-inch toy line was the play sets. put some giant air quotes around play sets. First of all, the USS Enterprise bridge. This was essentially a flat plastic mat that came with some pieces to make up the bridge, and you would have to buy every other figure, including ones that never came out, in order to complete it. But at least it came with a Kirk figure. And the other playset was the transporter room, which, much like the bridge, also had to be completed by buying all the other figures, though luckily less of it had to be completed, and you did get a Scotty figure included. This is what tanked the line, is because they relied on people buying this as well as every single figure to complete a playset instead of just making a full playset. Not everything is lost though, because the roleplay lineup for 2009 was pretty good. We have the phaser, which I actually own and I reviewed years ago. I just can't figure out where I put it, but it had a cool little flip gimmick. There was a communicator as well as a tricorder. There also was the Starfleet Command Mission Utility Belt, that was a thing, and the one ship released was the USS Enterprise in an electronic fashion that probably would have gone well with the old ships. So while the Star Trek 2009 movie did well, the toys didn't. Playmates put the Star Trek toy line on hold and wanted to have possible reorganization. It never came to pass. The toy companies were pretty much overstocked with the lineup. There was 3 different scales doing basically the same thing, and they were trying to get people to buy every single figure by putting in pieces, and it just didn't appeal to people. Part of it was because the movie wasn't very toyetic. A lot of the color schemes and patterns and design work looked cool in the movie, but didn't translate well to toys. And I think it didn't appeal to kids. Heck, I barely own any, and I was like 14 when that movie came out. And apparently Playmates was working on a plan to help collectors finish their bridge and transporter playsets, but I don't have any info if that ever actually came to be. In terms of canceled toys, for the 3 3/4 inch, we had Kirk Off-Duty, Regular Chekhov, Space Sulu, Dracolius, McCoy, Hegurgai, Kirk in Space, Keenzer, Cadet Kirk, Sarek, Spock as Instructor, and General Isle. For the 6-inch line, canceled figures included Kirk in a spacesuit, Chekhov, Instructor Spock, Dracolius, McCoy, Hengurgi, and Cadet Kirk. For 12-inch, there was a canceled Nero, Scotty, Uhura, and Kirk that would have finished off the main set, I think. There also was these canceled chibi figures, as that was a thing in 2009. There also was a classic assortment that was planned at one point that would have kind of brought the older characters into the 3 3/4 inch style. There was a Kid Spock figure that had design sheets. There was a couple more ships planned, old Spock in a coat, Vulcan Spock, and yeah, ultimately this stuff just didn't come to pass. And it's kind of a shame, but yeah, it's just how it goes. After the failure of the 2009 toy line, stores were reluctant to get toys. Hasbro picked up the license for Star Trek Into Darkness, but didn't produce anything significant beyond some building sets under Creo and maybe some other little things, but no significant full toy line. And sadly, we pretty much would just see some sporadic releases from different companies. Barbie would do some 50th anniversary Star Trek dolls, Diamond Select would put some stuff out here and there. There wasn't really that much. There was a return to Mego. Mego came back from the dead and started producing Star Trek toys again, and while it wasn't their main focus of the line, it has been pretty expansive and expanded the roster beyond TOS to include TNG, DS9, and Discovery. And honestly, it's really cool to see more Star Trek toys starting to pop up. It was nice when Super 7 announced the Reaction line would be covering Star Trek Next Generation and starting to make figures like Wesley Crusher in his early season appearance, which is something Playmates never got to, and these figures also fit in with the old Galoob TNG figures, which is pretty cool. That being said, Playmobil did put out this really nice, high-end, expensive Enterprise playset that is too big to film at times, and I haven't figured out how to shoot a video for it. And then of course you have Exo-6, who's producing a lot of different characters from different lines, such as Voyager, and I have reviewed Janeway before because, hey, I at least got one of those. But those are in the $200+ range for each figure, so it's not quite the same. Having an affordable Star Trek line that has the ability for kids and adult collectors to want to pick it up is definitely important. It's something we've been lacking. And hopefully, now that the 2022 return of the Star Trek line from Playmates, we'll actually start to see that. And I hope it's successful this time. And I hope that they learn from what the mistakes of the past were, and maybe this thing can go a little bit longer than it did last time.
So that concludes this video, and that concludes this series. Thank you to all the support that everyone's given me over the last year. I wanted to chronicle this line because I really do love it. It really is my favorite Star Trek toy line. And with the news that Playmates will be returning to this, and hopefully in a big way, that was just the catalyst to do this. And I'm glad that everyone's enjoyed it. I've gotten so much positive feedback on it. I hope you've all really enjoyed it. And for those of you that are watching this without having watched the previous videos, welcome! There's 5 more of these for you to check out, and there's plenty more Star Trek on the channel from the past, as well as the future. Because as Playmates has returned, I'm planning to review all of the upcoming toys. I'm dedicated for the long haul, and I hope you will join me on this journey. So hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't, hit the like button to let YouTube know that you enjoyed this video, and leave a comment down below and tell me your favorite thing about Playmates' Star Trek toy line. Or if you want to feel negative, tell me your least favorite thing about Playmates' Star Trek toy line. And stay tuned, as there is many more things in the future. Also, be sure to check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for Star Trek news and more, and my wonderful graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, live long and prosper.